Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Osseo gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Osseo's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Osseo. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. Mobile hunters, our buddies over at Tethered are always innovating to keep us more mobile and in the game when it counts. From the Tethered One Sticks, the Fast Pack, to the Ultra Lock saddle, Tethered is always designing to increase comfort and utility while reducing bulk, weight, and fiddle factor of mobile hunting gear. And now, they've outdone themselves yet again by creating the carbon fiber forged Predator CFX platform, the latest fully featured mobile saddle platform that raises the bar for what's possible in mobile hunting gear. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old tree climbing veteran, go to tetherednation.com for all your saddle hunting gear. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And for anyone who's been a listener of this show for any period of time or a fan of the Beast, you will recognize the mustached fellow on the other side of the line here, Mr. Dan Infalt, the Beast himself. What's going on, man?
Not much.
Appreciate you taking some time to hop on, buddy. I know you got a packed schedule. You were at the Hunter Expo, the Hunter Expo, I think the Mobile Hunter Expo this past weekend, and just you're all over the place.
Yeah, I'm always running around.
Yeah. Are you coming to Pennsylvania in like a couple weeks too?
Nope, not doing that one. It's just getting too
Not
close
doing
to
that
hunt. I got too much stuff going on.
Yeah. What's your prep look like right now? What are you working on? What are you dialing in?
I'm still trying to get all my stuff together and go through it. I always run through all my equipment and make sure everything's in good working order. Like I'll go through, look at all my nuts and bolts, cables on the tree stands, and do a once over on the camera arm, and
yeah,
get all my crap organized.
Yeah, just making sure you're not leaving anything to chance. I mean, a lot of people overlook that stuff. They just kind of figure like whatever they had from last year, whatever they did worked, and don't kind of take a hard look at it. I'm usually pretty good about going through it. I usually try to do it right after the season, right before I put everything away, just kind of take a look at everything. Check my ropes and things like that, make sure they're all good, make sure my carabiners are all still like in good shape and stuff like that. And then kind of knock the rust off with the bow and things like that. My biggest thing this past year was I've been shooting a lot of longbow since like February. And my plan is to try to use that this year. And she is a cruel beast. I will say that. Like, she giveth and taketh confidence away.
See that?
Yeah. I was getting ready. I was shooting long distance this past weekend, 60 some odd yards, getting ready for like an Idaho elk hunt, because I'll use my compound for that. And so I came back and I picked up my longbow and was shooting that. And just like being off for like a day or two from it, it was, not starting over, but just not as good as I was like, 3 days ago. And it's just 3 days ago, I was like, yeah, man, this thing's going to be in the woods with me the whole season. I was like, I'm looking forward to it. Going to make the switch over to a traditional bow. And then I was outside shooting today and I was like, ooh, man, this thing might have to stay in the truck.
Shot trad when I was a kid and got really good at it, but learned real quick. If you put it down for a minute, you lose it. You got to keep up with it constantly.
Yeah. What would you ever go back to it, do you think?
I don't think I have the time. I got too much other stuff I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I kind of got used to the compound.
Yeah.
But I still have a passion for it. I just don't think I want to dive 100% into it. I mean, most of the deer I do shoot and kill are within trad range.
Right. Yeah, that was kind of one of the deciding factors for me, was just how close most of the deer I'm shooting are, and that I could maybe make the switch. The one thing that gave me pause, though, I was talking to my buddy Joe Miles, and he was actually spending some time with Bobby Worthington. And I didn't realize this about Bobby, but he's like a renowned archer, like trad bow archer, and I didn't realize that, like tops in the world type of guy. But he doesn't use a traditional bow to hunt. And And so Joe was like, why don't you use a traditional bow to hunt? Like, if like you're one of the best, like with a traditional bow. He's like, oh, I don't think I could ever kill a deer with it. I was like, you want to talk about shooting your confidence? Like, here's a guy who's won like world medals and stuff like that who won't use it, you know?
Exactly.
But yeah, so I'm a glutton for punishment. So I'll probably end up, I'm going to try to get a couple, doe kills early in the year and build a little blood confidence, if you will. And if that happens, then I'll feel pretty good about taking it with me on every hunt. If I don't get that though, I think I'll be a little hesitant. I'll probably fall back on the compound for one more year, but we'll see. But so one thing I wanted to ask you about, man, is I know like you're looking pretty svelte, my friend. You're looking like half the beast that I remember seeing like maybe 2 years ago. What's going on?
Yeah, I lost a little weight. Been working out a little bit. I'm one of those kind of guys that dwells on problems, and if something's causing you issues, I fix it, and that was one of the issues. Got my weight up there. I really like to eat. I am like addicted to food. There's something about it, like when I watch TV or if I get into a project or even if I'm working on something where I got to think, it's like without even thinking, a drink gets opened and something to eat gets opened, and you don't even realize you're doing it. And I do that constantly. So I just stopped all that. I just have, my main meal and something small in the morning now, and I drink a lot more water and a lot less soda and sugary drinks and stuff,
Yeah. It's funny how much stuff you'll just kind of do automatically like that, because I used to do that too, like just sitting working on the computer. I'd want to have like a drink in my hand, or I'd want to have, a snack or whatever. It just makes the time kind of go by, or whatever the case is. It can kind of get away from you pretty quick, and usually you have to make a conscious effort to like stop it, otherwise it just kind of continues to evolve. But I was just curious, like, have you recognized any benefits from a hunting perspective of like the lifestyle change and stuff like that?
Hell yeah. Literally, you don't realize it. You're hauling around that weight. I mean, if you think about if you, I lost 60 pounds, but I ended up putting about 15 of it back on. But when I lost the 60 pounds, I did it rapidly, and it was so much different. So literally, it was like taking a bag of concrete, putting it over your shoulder, and carrying it everywhere you go. So I mean, people are trying to take an ounce or something out of their tree stand. I took 60 pounds, And when you do that, you feel it. I mean, I didn't realize that's you kind of realize it, but you don't really think about it. But when you're hiking back 2 miles through really rugged or nasty terrain, which makes it 10 times more difficult. It's like going way further. It ain't like walking that on a straight road or something, When you're going back into distances like that, hunting, carrying your gear, and dressed for an evening of hunting, it is hard on you, and it got a lot easier.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I always, kind of say, because, there's people who, will say you don't need to be in great shape to hunt whitetails. And I agree with that, right? Like plenty of people get it done without, focusing on, being in shape and stuff like that. And even for going out west, I always say, like, you don't need to be an Olympic athlete to do that, right? It takes a little bit of preparation and stuff like that so you can have the type of hunt that you want to have. But, my kind of intention was always, looking at guys that are older than me, going, especially guys that are able to kind of get after it, that are 10, 15 years older than me, and going, I want to be able to hunt the way I like to hunt for as long as I can. I don't want to have to settle. I don't want to have to say, man, I'm not going to climb that ridge today because, man, it's just, I ain't got it in me today, or whatever the case is, right? It's like, if that's where I need to be, then I want to be able to get there. And there's a point in time where that, father time kind of takes that away from you just in general, right? I don't want to help him along, to make that happen any quicker than it needs to, and so I always say, like, whatever you can do to kind of, to prolong that, it's, if you really love hunting, then you should kind of look at it as like an investment in, being able to do it as long as you possibly can.
Yeah, Exactly. When I was younger, I burnt the food back off, and I kept eating like that when I got older, even though I wasn't burning it off as much. And, I'm 57, so I look at a lot of people my age that can't even go out and do this. I mean, they couldn't start it now, and I probably couldn't start it now if I hadn't done it my whole life. But the reason I'm able
Right.
to walk 3 miles, and you look at the 20-year-old kids that hunt around me, and they're like, how can you do that? I can't do that. And the reason I
Hmm.
can is because I never stopped, and I never gave up, and I never quit. If you ever
Yeah.
sat down for a year, at my age, you'd lose it. You wouldn't be able to do it no
Yeah.
more. You have to
Yeah.
keep going. There's a peak time in your life like that, you, you know, like 25 to 35 years old, where a guy is at his max health, and he's also at his max focus, his max endurance and stuff. And that's the time frame that most guys that are really great hunters kill the majority of their giant bucks.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's that marriage of lower responsibilities with maximum time and capability. You know what I mean? Like willingness, I guess is one way to say it. Yeah. I'm always disappointed, around hunting season whenever I see like someone mention something on Facebook and they'll say, you know, I shouldn't say I'm disappointed. Like in some ways, it kind of breaks my heart a little bit where I'll see a guy say, wish I could get out and still do that, and he's like 50 years old. I'm 46, and he's 40 years older than me. And he stopped hunting because he physically can't go do it anymore, for whatever, because he's not in good health or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, man, it doesn't take much, like an ounce of prevention, would help you kind of extend that, if you really wanted to. And I just hate seeing guys say that. And I'm like, man, if you just, and it doesn't take a lot, right? It's just like watching a little bit of what you eat and doing a little moving, so I'm like very minimal things will get you a lot of results. It's not mystical, I guess. Right.
A lot of it's attitude too. I've got friends that are, going on 70. One that's over 70. The one that's over 70 he's had multiple knee surgeries. He's been in, accidents and stuff, and get screwed up, and he can hardly walk, but he goes and he works out every day just so that he can hunt in the fall. And every fall he goes out and he keeps going and he keeps hunting beast style and keeps killing big bucks, even though it half kills him. And no, he can't keep up with me, but the fact that he keeps trying is why he's getting out there at all. And then you see the guys that aren't in that bad of shape, but their knee hurts, so they just don't go. And everybody's different, and what kills those bucks is the drive. If you really want to do it, you'll find a way. I mean, some guys go out
Yeah.
there and they get an electric wheelchair because they can't walk and they're paralyzed, and they still get out in the woods. What are their chances on public land next to me or you? But they still try. You got to want
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, man. I mean, attitude is everything, especially, being in shape or like, that kind of stuff. Certainly, it's all about attitude. Like if you want to do it, you'll do it, and hunting too. I mean, I think the longer you do it, it's a weird thing. Like attitude and confidence are two things that I think earlier on, maybe, in people's hunting journey, they don't maybe value as much. Like they overvalue like what's the latest strategy or the trick or like the silver bullet or whatever the case is, right? They kind of over rotate on that stuff. And I think as you get a little older, at least this has been my experience, when you start focusing on confidence and attitude, things change, right? Because I know for me personally, I've had, last year was a good example where I just had a feeling and I couldn't explain it to anybody. I was like, I just feel like it's going to happen, like in these couple days, like, this one hunt. And I had the best year I ever had last year. And it's like, I felt like it was just like one of those things where like the spots I felt were good. Like I had a lot of confidence in them. And when I went in, like I went in to kill, like that was kind of the mindset. Right. And that was my attitude. I have a similar feeling about this year. Like I have a lot of good intel on, a couple of different things and I feel really good about it. And so I think people way overlook that stuff until they've had their teeth kicked in maybe a little bit and realize that, that's really actually the secret sauce.
You
The
Everybody's kind of
so
looking for that
speaking of the
little, gimmick in Gasma. It's like those young guys are all like, they'll fixate on one thing. You know what I mean? When really they make it too complex. It's easier than they want to make it easy, but they make it complex. What I should say is like they get into like mock scrapes, calling, rattling. They go out to food sources and try to follow the deer back and stuff. When it can really be just a simple formula that just being quiet and not letting the deer know you're there and figuring out where they bed. I mean, just kills them real easy.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of putting up with not seeing a lot of deer, but you see the right ones, And young guys just got that. They want it so much they'll do anything, and they just kind of fall into all those traps of all the different people telling them all kinds of theories and stuff. And what you don't realize is, nowadays anybody can have a platform, and a lot of guys that got podcasts and stuff have killed less than the people listening to the podcast, and they're telling the people listening how to do it.
Yeah, 100%, man. I think it's funny because when you talk about, everyone's kind of looking to make it easy, but by doing that, they're really kind of making it harder on themselves. Like the one thing, again, with age comes wisdom, right? Like you lose a little bit in like physical capability and stuff like that, but you kind of start to learn like, where the bear shit in the woods, so to speak. And, the one thing I kind of kept coming back to after, the past several years, and I've had the fortune of, running this show for quite a long time and had you on a bunch of different times and been able to text message you and, and just other buddies that we both know, and the one thing I kind of always kept coming back to, and it holds true in a lot of different areas, is just the guys that are really consistent, they do the fundamental things really, really well. Right. And every now and then they'll pull a rabbit out of their hat. You know what I mean? Like they got the, the capability to go, what, I've seen this thing once or twice before. I'm gonna have to get weird. And that's probably going to be the reason why I either get real close or I kill him, but 99% of the time it's just doing the basics right. It's finding where they bed, paying attention to your wind, paying attention to your access, paying attention to time of season and food sources kind of changing. And if you do those things really, really well, you're probably going to fill a lot of tags.
Right. Yeah. I've been having that conversation a lot the last few days with a lot of people, but it's really, people make it so complex. They look at a giant woods and they get lost in it and stuff. And really for me, it's as simple as I find a buck on a property and then I eliminate 90% of the property as that's where people hunt. I don't worry about where the food is, and everybody's worried about where's the corn, where's the clover, where are the acorns. I don't really worry about that. I worry about where's the 10% of that property where people rarely go, whether it's alongside of a road between parking lots, whether it's across a deep creek. I worry about those little tiny sections of that property. And then I look at, does it have the terrain to hold a big buck? And if it does, that'll knock it down to 5 or 6% of that property. And if there's no sign of big bucks in those little percentage spots, I'm out of there onto the next property doing the same thing. And I literally, once I find a buck, I just hunt down those spots and kill it. And it's that easy. Yeah. Well, all these guys are going to the bean field or something, and they're following the rubs back to what they think is bedding, and they're guessing on it and setting up, and everybody's doing that. Everybody's getting the same results. They're all getting pictures just a little after dark, playing that game of maybe today he'll come in daylight, where I'm going to where they actually live and killing them. And to me, it just seems so simple, but yet the majority of people aren't doing that.
Yeah. So when you walk in, when you narrow that down to that 5 to 10%, right? Because I've taken a lot from the stuff that that you and I've talked about personally on the podcast or text, watching videos, watching your podcast. So I've said this to you a million times, and that I probably at some point need to buy you a nice bottle of bourbon or a pizza or something for for the success that I've had. Because it's a lot of the teachings that you've provided that I've used that have given me that kind of roadmap. But the one thing that kind of, still kind of stymies me sometimes, and it's less and less, but when I'm in a real big woods piece and I have maybe some historical sign that's around, but these, some of these mature deer in these big kind of open areas, I don't know if it's because their core ranges don't necessarily overlap or what it is, but I just don't find a lot of sign, but I know that a deer is there, wherever it's at, whether it's in Kansas or whether it's in Pennsylvania, Ohio, whatever the case is. But I'm I have trail camera confirmation, or I have a visual confirmation that I've seen him. going either back to bed or coming out of bed. Like, so it's around that time frame where he's got to be close to bed because it's at like 8:30 a.m., right? Or he's got to be close. I'm close to his bed because he's come out and it's like 30 minutes after dark or whatever the case is. But when I look at like the fresh sign that's in that area, like there's not a whole lot. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like he's a ghost to a degree. So what do you do like when you have that type of situation? Because I'm running into that a lot, especially in like big woods areas. And I've just kind of got comfortable with knowing that like there's not going to be a lot of sign, and I just have to know like my intuition that he's going to be in an area. But it's kind of hard, especially maybe for someone who's newer into that game. It's hard to convince yourself that you're correct.
That's a really good question. So I got a couple takes on that. So first off, the reason you're probably seeing that situation is because you're probably hunting pressured land that probably only has one deer in that class. So he doesn't have any competition for that bedding. If you get onto private managed land, it's the total opposite. The areas around the bedding area and the areas where those deer live in daylight will be tore up. There'll be rub lines coming out of the bedding area and up, down every trail because they're competing for that bedding area. Deer of the same age class. When you get into public land, a lot of times you got to search several public properties to find a deer of the age class you want to hunt. And, that's not everywhere in the country, but a lot of places like in the Midwest or out east, you do have that where there might not be a big buck on every property. So if you have one on the property, he doesn't have to rub by his bedding. So that can be very difficult, even for me, because I am, positive that I walked right past stuff already and paid it no attention because there was no big buck sign. But if I know there's a big buck in the area, on the property, I can kill that buck in those spots, and I'll have confidence that whether there's rubs or not, that he's probably using it. Maybe he's using it. I'll give it a shot. It helps to have one or two rubs in those areas, but you don't have to. The biggest buck I ever shot, there wasn't a rub or a scrape within 100 yards of that buck's bedding. And I watched that buck bed in that spot for 2 seasons, probably 20 or 30 times before I actually killed him in that bed. And there were no rubs or scrapes anywhere near that. The only thing I had was tracks and the sightings. So, and those cases are hard if you're going on confidence. But I will say, if it's a larger property, and you're not stuck in some little corner of bedding that's on private or public, if it's a larger property, there will be big rubs somewhere. All bucks rub. They're still going to mark and compete even with the younger deer around food. They're still going to mark doe trail crossings that cross their trails. They're still going to mark around doe bedding areas. They just might not mark their own bedding areas if there's just like one in the area.
Right. Do you find, in that same scenario, that those, let me ask the question a little bit differently. When you do find those kind of less frequent rubs from that deer, right? Because like to your point, like they're not going to not make any sign. But when you do find it, do you find that it is from a particular time of year, or is it kind of throughout the year, or is it kind of usually kind of compressed into like a specific kind of time frame?
That's a really good question too. The rubs do vary, and if I find a buck bedding area that is just tore up with rubs, excessively, and they're all high rubs for big bucks, or they vary, big and smaller bucks, in the bedding area at the beds. And at the beds is important because if it's a doe bedding area, they'll mark the perimeter, but not in the beds, you know what I mean? So the rubs being right at the beds means it's a buck bedding there. But if there's multiple rubs in there, a lot of times that's rut. Pre-rut. That's when they're the most worked up. That's when they rub the most trees. But they'll still rub at other times of the year, and quite a bit too. But it won't be quite as aggressive like shredded trees and all that stuff they do, in rut. I can think of several bedding areas that I found a lot of rubs where they only bedded there in early season. And in those areas, you can kind of see the difference. A lot of the trees in the swamps that I hunt got that bright orange bark. When they get rubbed on, you can see those rubs for a mile because they're bright orange. If those are rubbed in September, when they first come out of velvet in early season. By the time spring comes around and I'm spring scouting, they're gray. But the ones that were rubbed in November during rut are still orange. And you kind of see that. You start to see the differences. Right. And you start making accurate guesses on when they bed there. Now, I've done some, obviously a lot of observations in hunting and hunting these bedding areas and stuff. But I've also taken it a step further and done studies with trail cameras, put trail cameras in bedding areas and sacrificed them or whatever. And some of those bedding areas have had trail cameras in them for 3-4 years, where I just observe timing and what comes in there, if it's the same bucks year after year, because that teaches me. Mm-hmm. And what I've learned is most of these bedding areas have like a 2-week peak period. There are a few bedding areas that get a lot of use, multiple times in a year or multiple peak times. But there seems to be a 2-week peak period that, give or take a few days. But in that 14 days of that mature buck that bedding in that spot, what I would see is he would be there like 5 or 6 times. So less than half, right? Half the days. But that's still better odds than, randomly hunting wherever, right?
Right.
So if you get the timing down, if you figure it out, is he here because there's a acorn flat here and the exit trail goes straight into acorns and the acorns are marked and you can tell he's going to the acorns and eating them. Well, then I'd be hunting that when there's acorns. If it's the trails, the bedding area is just tore up with rubs and the trails go right to doe bedding, close by, or they're observing doe bedding, it's probably rut. If it's in, sometimes I don't know. But the sign tells me, like the rubs are a certain age, or or the cover wouldn't hold a buck after November when the leaf drop,
Right.
So you're sitting in there and you're doing some detective work and trying to figure out why, when, and how is a buck bedding here? What wind would he bed in this bed on? He's not going to bed here and be vulnerable. So if the wind's coming from this way, he wouldn't be able to sense danger. He's not there on that wind. So I'm starting to put 2 and 2 together on these spots and putting a best case scenario guess into when he's going to be there. And once I get that down, it's just a matter of waiting for that, short window to hunt it. And you'll hear a lot of people say, I'm saving my spot for rut. It's a good spot. That's just the stupidest thing I've ever heard. If it's a rut spot, save it for rut. But it isn't necessarily a rut spot. They have different places they are in different time periods. And literally, the cameras show it, and my hunting shows it. Young guys that really don't have a lot of skill do way better in rut. Even guys with average skill do way better in rut. The majority of the mature bucks I shoot are in early season, not rut. Mm-hmm. A few of them are in rut, but the majority of them are in early season because they're still patternable and stuff. They're harder to pattern during rut. And there's a million people in the woods if you hunt public land. You can't go down a trail without running into somebody. It's a harder nut to crack, But you can get lucky. That's the upside.
Right. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I've taken from you over the years. And my favorite time of year is that I always say like the October lull is actually my favorite time to hunt. Because there's usually fewer people in the woods. I'll try to get out in the middle of the week. I'll take like some mornings off. And actually it's October lull mornings are my favorite times to hunt because I usually get the coldest temperatures of the day in the morning, right? Because you're waiting till the evening to get the temp drop. And depending on how warm it is, it's probably going to be colder in the morning when you start than it is by the time it gets dark, right? And then middle of the week, so I avoid some of the pressure because people aren't usually hunting during the week during that time of year or as often. And that's when I've had my best encounters. And, it took me a couple years to figure this particular spot out. And then I actually killed one and kayaked him out this year in that spot on like the 15th or 16th of October, and it's absolutely my favorite time to hunt, because I have the woods to myself and, I get a little bit more predictability. And I get, cold mornings. I can get cold mornings that time of year. And I just prefer mornings for some reason. I don't know why. I always I hate getting up early, but there's just something about watching the sun come up and watching a deer come through, on a crisp morning that I don't know that you just can't beat it,
Yeah, I like around home. I like September because September's really easy for me to pattern. It's when I've shot my biggest bucks is that first week or so of the season. I don't see a lot of big bucks,
Hmm.
but I see the right ones. You know what I mean? I'm hunting a specific target.
Right.
That has always been a really good time frame for me, especially if I've located one before season without him knowing I've located them. I've done really good opening week.
Right.
But when you get outside of opening week, my favorite time is pretty similar to yours. For my traveling trips and even around home for rut, I like going before rut. So the last week of October. I usually start my morning huntings October 15th. That's when they start, coming back to bed later and stuff like that, getting back in daylight. But that last week of October, if you're going on a trip, like you go to, say, someplace well-known, Kansas or Iowa or, one of those destination states, what you're going to find is everybody saves their vacation for that peak rut, and that means the woods is empty that week before rut. And what happens is those mature bucks start, moving further and earlier than they have been. They've been kind of locked up in that early October kind of nocturnal-ish state, right? But when it rut starts starting to get going, they still stay on a pattern, but now they mark their trails. They start rubbing everything. And you can kind of go through the woods and read it, and nobody's out there because they're all waiting for the next week. They're all working overtime to get next week off and kissing up to the old ladies and all that stuff. But they're leaving that week alone. And if you think about it, you go down to Iowa and peak rut, there might be a lot of big bucks running around, but you're on public land. You walk a mile during rut to scout, and you'll get whistled at. You'll have people going, "What the hell?" It's really that week before rut seems way better to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because, I've got, I'm going to Missouri this year, but the last 3 years I was in Kansas. And Tody Peterson, I was talking to him about it, and he's similar to you, where he's like, man, take your trip early. Take your trip early. He's like, especially Kansas, you'll be able to see him, you'll bed one, you'll watch him for 2 days, and every year I'm kind of like, yeah, I should probably do an early trip and see if I, because I'm just going to have less people to deal with and stuff like that. And then every year I don't. I end up going like, the first 2 weeks of November or whatever, and I'm playing, parking lot jockeying with like other guys and stuff like that, which makes it challenging, but that time frame, it's something I probably need to start paying a little bit more attention to and focusing my trips on that time frame just for that reason. Because I will say, like, the past several years, I'd be curious what your perspective is on this too, but I feel like just in the past couple years, I've seen a big uptick in just the amount of people on the public pieces. Like, even around me, because I live in like a suburb area, so there's pressure here just in general because I live close to a large metro area. But even from like 5 years ago to this, like 5 years ago, I was finding, I had plenty of hidey holes that I could go hunt, and like no one was ever going to bother me. Like, there might be pressure on the piece, but like I didn't have guys walking in on me. And in the past 2 years, I've probably had more guys walk in on me, like within 50 yards of me, than I had like the previous like 5 years combined, And so I'm just curious if you're seeing the same thing, because I'm noticing it not just locally, but I'm also noticing it whenever I'm traveling out of state. Like, I'm just seeing way more people than I have in the past.
I'm seeing slightly more people, not a lot of more people. But what I am seeing that makes it different is I'm seeing a much more educated public land hunter. I would say that there's similar numbers, not quite as many, not too long ago, if you go back 10, 20 years, but they would go hunt in the middle of the woods. They wouldn't bother you. You didn't even really notice them. Now they're going down on those points. They're going out into those islands. They're finding those little features. They're willing to walk a mile. I think there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, all the education guys like me and you were doing for these people, helping them learn how to hunt. And another thing is like the biggest thing that ever happened to hunting, and never really got credit for it, was like Onyx, those apps. Being able to map that on your phone gave people a lot of confidence. A lot of people were just afraid to go out that far. They're afraid to not be able to find their truck in the dark, or that really gave people that feeling of security that they could get back out. And at that point, they could real easily see every little nook and cranny. They could see those spots that I used to go to a map store and buy a big map of the property, buy a topo and aerial, and study these things and learn every little inch and go, oh, look at this. This looks like private, but it's actually part of the public. I can go over there. And everybody else would walk right past it. You know, now they see that plain as day on their phone and they're walking out there. So now I'm seeing pressure in those spots. It ain't necessarily that there's more people. It's they're more educated and they've got the ability to not fear the woods. Where I've never feared the woods. Maybe you haven't either. But now all these other people are going out doing the same. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. You know, and it's funny you mentioned the you know, like the mapping apps, you know, like the Spartan Forges of the world and stuff like that, you know, you're right. They do give people confidence, right? And I was having this conversation with our mutual friend, Chad Sylvester. He and I were chatting about it because we were just talking about technology and hunting and stuff like that. And it always seems, you know, I joke with him because I was like, you know, it's the dog days of hunting summer. I was like, whenever the trail camera debates start, you know, around July sometime, around people not liking them or whatever, you know, I was like, no one has anything else to talk about. So that comes up. But I was like, truthfully, I was like, if you really wanted to think about what has killed more deer, I mean, for my money, like maybe not historically, like over the span of like hunting tanks, trail cameras have obviously been out around longer than, you know, hunting apps have, or, you know, mapping apps have. But I would say since mapping apps have been available, I would venture a guess that those have actually led to more deer being killed than trail cameras have.
Yeah. You know, everybody's crying about crossbows. I think that app has killed way, way more deer than crossbows.
Yeah, exactly. But you don't ever hear anybody complaining about that. You know, it's like, I remember the days too, like, you know, growing up where I grew up, you know, I was always just in the woods, like whether it was with my dad, my uncles, like whatever the case was. And I just hunted around, you know, I lived in rural Pennsylvania. So there was, you know, family owned land all around us. And then there was the public land that wasn't far away. And so I knew it all from being around it as a kid. You know, I'd go out and I'd play in it. And I'd take a BB gun whenever I was younger before I could hunt, and just, you know, it was go outside, don't come back till it's dark type of thing. You know, you just go out and make your own fun, you know, and so it was the same way with hunting. And then when I started traveling out of state, like, you know, those trips were, you know, I would get like a map with like the sections that I could kind of see and like be able to mark and be like, all right, I want to check this section out. And I had no clue what it would look like when I got there. You know, I'm just looking at like borders and stuff like that and going like, yeah, this spot looks pretty good. We'll walk in here and see what it looks like, you know? And that was about the extent of it. And I don't know if I ever told you the story, but I got lost in this one spot in Ohio. And that's actually how I killed the deer I killed on that trip. Was I got lost and trying to find my way back. I stumbled across this top third. It was a classic beast setup. It was a top third. And it was one of those things where I was like, oh, I know where I'm at now. It was like, I got turned around and I like walked around for like 2 hours, and I was like, finally figured out where I was at. And I was like, well, you know, I only have a little bit of time left, so I'm going to set up here. And I set up there, and like, I had a couple of deer come through, and they just couldn't wind me. And I was in that, and this is before I really even knew what a thermal tunnel was at that top third, but that's what I was sitting in. And so I went back the next day, and I think it was like on the third day or whatever it was, I ended up killing, you know, a good public land 10 point, right? And it was all because, you know, I got turned around and lost, you know, and like I just stumbled upon like a really good spot, you know. And that's part of like, you know, what I think sometimes like what people miss is like some of those happy screw ups, because now everything's so dialed in and you can see everything and you can know everything. And so a little bit of like the mystery, you know, is kind of taken away from it a little bit. Cause that was one of my favorite hunts.
You know, if you go back 50, 60 years ago, which isn't all that long, there were debates about compound bows being ethical. There was, you know, a lot of places it was illegal to hunt out of a tree stand. You had to hunt on the ground, especially gun hunting. But all that's changed, you know. Things just continuously get easier and technology takes over. And I know some of the more modern stuff makes me cringe too. I don't want to ever see hunting get easy for deer. I want it to always be the one thing in life we have to work for. And
yeah.
The last frontier of what we actually fight for as men to struggle to earn, instead of
Yeah.
buy.
Yeah, I tell you, like and that for me sometimes is part of it is that like playing around with a traditional bow. I was talking to some people about it and they would ask me why I want to make it that much harder. And I'm like, part of it is because, I do like the challenge of it. I like it to be hard. But part of it is too is, I was like, to your point, I was like, I feel like we continue to move further and further away from like connection to things, like, because that to me is like how you make things easy is you put things between you and whatever the obstacle is, right? Like to help you, like, if you're trying to move something, the first thing was like create a lever, right? Back in the ancient times, right? Like, let's make a lever, we'll move this big rock, as opposed to just putting your hands on the rock and moving it, right? And not saying that that's not a smart idea, but part of it for me was wanting to be as connected as I possibly can to how people did it before me. And so that was part of the intrigue to start moving to a traditional bow. I was like, because how do I make this thing even more meaningful to me? We'll get closer to it, like make it even closer to like an extension of me, right? So now instead of being able to shoot one at 27 yards or 26 yards, it's like, I got to be within like 10 now, I got to be able to see the whites of its eyes, and so, so I think there's something to it, man, that everyone's looking for the easy route. And I agree with you. It's like, I don't think that I ever want it to be easy. I want to be able to frame success without filling a tag, and I want it to be hard.
Hunting's not easy, and it's not supposed to be. You're supposed to earn it.
Yeah, 100%. So I want to pivot here 1 second because we've been talking about kind of like hunting style. Well, actually, before we do this, I want to ask you one other question about the rubs and stuff that we were talking about, just like the kind of vast area whenever there's not a ton of sign. Like how much, when you walk into an area like that, we're going way back into we're in a big area. Buck's not laying down a bunch of sign necessarily. He's laying down sign somewhere, but there's a bunch of historical sign, a bunch of historical rubs. Like when you have a vacuum of no like fresh sign that has been made necessarily, like do you put value into those historical like kind of components to say like, yeah, this area is right to hold a good buck. Like he may not be laying stuff down, but if there's a good buck here, the sign from 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 2 years ago is substantial enough in this area that yes, like I feel like if there is one here, he would be here.
Yeah, if you see a history of rubs over the years, that's important to me. It doesn't have to be that there's fresh rubs. I just have to know that there's a buck that lives on that property. But the fact that he's not rubbing those is a little concerning. But maybe he hasn't done it yet this year, per se. But like you said, some of those bucks do not rub, especially if there's not competition. But if I'm thinking he's bedding in an area, or he could be, and I'm hunting down a buck that I know is in an area, and I see historical rubs coming out of a bedding area that are, say, 2 years old, 3 year old, 4 years old, that are from big bucks, but nothing in the last year or two, I would be hunting the rub line coming out of that bedding area, even though it's an old rub line, because those bucks will repeatedly do the same things their ancestors did. They follow a certain terrain, they follow a certain trail for reasons, and it repeats year after year until somebody interrupts it and messes it up, and then it starts repeating again after that person finally, after screwing it up, hasn't seen anything for a few years and gives up. A couple of years goes by and they start doing the same pattern again.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, because I've always kind of thought that's kind of been my like intuition, is that if I find just good general historical sign, I usually, mark it, a camera goes in there. I'll throw, especially if it's brand new, it's like I'll throw a couple hunts at it and see what I see. And then it usually just, it continues to be a place of interest until until it's no longer interesting, I guess is a way to put it, but I want to go back to, so when we were talking about like the hunting apps and those things have killed more deer than crossbows and stuff like that. The one thing that might have killed more deer than maybe even hunting apps might be like beast style hunting, right? So that might have like killed more deer just in general, right? But I was curious. I was thinking about this. You and I were chatting last week on Monday, I think it was, and I got off the phone, and my wife's always, she can hear me whenever I get excited and I'm on the phone, and we were having a really fun conversation. And she was like, "Who were you talking to?" And because she's like, "You were awfully excited about," she knows I get excited when I'm talking deer hunting, but you had me extra animated when I got off the phone that evening. And the and I told her, I was talking to you, and we were just kind of talking a little bit, and I was explaining to her a little bit, about beast hunting or whatever, and she knows your name and things like that. And I just kind of started thinking that I've never asked you this, and I was just curious. Do you ever stop and just kind of think about and reflect on did you ever anticipate that beast style hunting or beast hunting would kind of evolve into what it is today?
I don't know how to answer that. I think when I first made it a mission, back in the days of when I started the original thing, which was Blood Brothers,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that, to some degree, remember I was younger and cockier. I thought I was going to change the world. I thought I was going to release all this is how I'm killing these bucks, and, everybody's going to change. And instead what I got was kickback because nobody had ever heard of that. At that time frame, people were told, stay out of bedding, stay away from bedding, don't go. And it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. It rubbed a lot of people in the industry the wrong way too. I was as if I was dissing what they were doing. And
Right.
a lot of people coming up into what we were doing were dissing those people and not respecting them. You heard a lot of people saying these deer farmers or, would mock the Druries or, Lee and Tiffany or whatever. Where I love those guys. I think they're great. They do things their way. They do plenty of work too. They just do a different way than I do. And I'm sure they enjoy it as much as I do. But I didn't anticipate it growing this big. And every now and then you look back or you go to a show like the mobile show, and everybody's speaking, you're looking at them and you're like, every one of these people started out with 0 deer on the wall on Hunting Beast or on Blood Brothers and grew for a while and then went off and started their own channel. And most people don't even realize it. I think you probably do. But it's staggering how many people in the industry came from that. And I do feel kind of cool about that, but I don't dwell on it. I'm always looking towards the future. I'm one of those guys that kind of really doesn't look back. I'm always looking forward.
Right.
I don't even dwell on the deer I kill. Most people put them on the wall and stare at them all day, I think, like you got your buddies, every time you go by their house, they want to take you in their room and show you the same deer you've seen 10 times, I'm not like that. My deer aren't even at my house.
Right.
They're still sitting. They're all at a taxidermist. I haven't even seen the booner I shot last year. It's just sitting on his wall. The one I shot 2 years ago, I first seen when I dropped the booner off this year, mounted.
Right.
I don't dwell on those things. I as soon as I kill a buck, I feel like I'm satisfied. I feel like I'm just gonna take a break and spend some time with my wife. She probably deserves it. I've left her alone all year or whatever, and I go out with her for a night or two, and the mentality starts to change. And I just start pacing the floor, and she's just like, "Just go buy a tag wherever you're gonna buy a tag, and just go. I can't put up with you pacing the floor, staring out the window." And I go, it's like the caged rat thing. I'm always on to the next one, or helping the next person, and I don't worry about who I've helped in the past, or to me, everything's about helping people and helping this industry. I think most people that are doing what me and you do are doing it for more ego. And I probably was doing it more for ego when I was younger, but I've got a goal that I set a while back, and that goal is to make people better hunters and hunters better people. And it's really about, I just feel like the world would be a better place if everybody hunted. And and a lot of people were struggling because when I started this, as you know, it was taboo to tell anybody your secrets. And when I did that, I got a lot of kickback for that. A lot of people hated me for releasing the secrets, and I really didn't care because I wanted to see more people hunt. I wanted to see young people succeed. I didn't want to see them go 5 years and never even see a deer. I wanted them to at least, be in the game and have some action. And the more the hunters, the better. And for the people that say, we don't have enough public land or whatever, well, buy more. Push your legislators or whatever. If we have more hunters and they're getting more money, they should be using that to buy more property.
Right. Yeah, man, make people better hunters and hunters better people. That's such a good way to look at it. And, I think you're right that, if we had more people who just spent some time, there's a lot of value in just, if nothing else, spending time outdoors with your thoughts.
Exactly.
In peace and quiet. Like, I feel bad for people who have never experienced that. Like what I was talking about earlier on those cool October mornings, mid-October, like there's just something about them that is, regardless of whether I see a deer or not, it just gets me right. Like I watch the sunrise and it's just, like I said, I'm not a morning person necessarily. Like I don't like the 3:30, 4 a.m. wake up calls as, any more than the next guy does. But I always, when I get home and I'm tired, my wife's like, "Are you tired?" I'm like, "Yeah." I was like, but I've never once regretted getting up and going hunting in the morning and watching the sunrise. Never, and, that's the kind of perspective I hope people get, from listening to the show, from the stuff that you're doing and stuff like that, is that, killing deer is fun. Don't get me wrong. I love doing it, but you got to take those other little wins and helps, heal your soul a little bit, because the outdoors will do that for you if you let it.
When I grew up in the 80s, I was a teenager in the 80s, and back then, everybody, and I mean everybody in the high schools was doing drugs. They're all smoking pot, they're doing cocaine, alcohol was rampant. There was really nothing to do. There was no like computers. Your household had one TV. Nobody had phones. So everybody just went out and drank and partied, and it was kind of like a toxic atmosphere. A lot of people I went to school with died, overdosed, or all kinds of crap. And I think what saved me was hunting. Getting away from everything. And it just, hunting's been like my church. You go out there, you clear your mind, you think about the things in your day, you think about your family, you think about the people you've lost. I go to the woods when somebody in my family dies to be alone. Spend time out there. I go to the woods when I need to think. It's my clear mind place where you don't have that hassle and bustle of everything else. And these young people that go out there, they see life and death. They kill something, and they see the results of what they did. And they start to understand the whole world a little better, in my opinion. And the more people that see that and experience it and live to actually kill their own food and kind of live off the land and learn to understand the cycle of life, I think are just better people. And I'd like to see more of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I 100% agree. I think it helps too, like, not getting caught up in what this person killed, what you killed last year,
right.
Whatever the case is. Chad and I have this kind of running joke that we always tell each other, like every year we're like, no one's going to care like what you killed except 3 people. Like a couple of your buddies are going to be excited for you, and that's about it. And it's so true. Like you were saying last year, it's like you killed a great deer, and it's like you haven't seen it, right? I did the same thing. My dad was disappointed when I drove home from Kansas, because he's like, "Where's the rack at? That deer I shot?" I'm like, "Oh, I left it in Kansas. I left it at the taxidermist." He's like, "I just dropped it off at the taxidermist out there." He's like, "You didn't bring the rack home for people to see?" And I'm like, "No." I was like, "I'll see it when I get it back." I was like, I saw it while I was there. What's that?
I said, "You want a picture?"
Yeah, I know, right? I'm like, I was like, there was a couple pictures that were taken. I can show you a picture, of it. I was like, but it was, for me, it wasn't that deer necessarily. It was the experience that I had was the part that I was explaining it to somebody, that when I think back to that hunt, the first thing I recall is actually my buddies that were hunting like an hour away from me, that like when I text them that I shot it, and I was elated. I wasn't sure how big he was at that point, my mind was going a million miles an hour, but they stopped their hunts and drove an hour and said, "Don't touch him. We want to help you get him out." Like they wanted to come drive an hour, take away from their hunt,
wanted to be part of it,
just to come with me to help drag it out. Not because they felt like I needed help, but because they just want to be part of it, And that's the part that I remember most, is that it's not releasing the arrow. It's not taking the pictures. It's literally that part of with my buddies. And the other part is watching him approach. Had nothing to do with releasing the arrow. It was just like the majestic way he looked coming in and spending time with my buddies afterwards. That was it. Those are the two things I remember.
That's a really interesting topic. When I went and dropped that last head off, I was sitting in a taxidermy studio, and he's got this one huge wall dedicated to me. He's got all the bucks up there. And I was just sitting there looking at him, and I saw a couple bucks, and I was like, when did I shoot that? Is that my buck? You look at it for a minute, and I figured out, yeah, I did shoot that. And I'm not talking about something small. I'm talking about something that's wall-worthy, right? And I couldn't even remember shooting the damn thing. And then we recall it, you're like, oh, yeah. But there's certain things you never forget. You never forget the stories with your friends. You never forget that first buck, or some big achievement. It's really, when I think back of my hunts, or when I tell a story, what I see different from me now from a young Dan, or what I see different now from me to some other guy that's maybe just starting out, is they're talking about the size of the buck and how giant it was and Eagle Fest, where really for me, it's really about the hunt. It's not about the kill. When I kill a giant buck, and it's over, it's kind of sad. It's the hunt that took you 2 years. It's the figuring out the bedding area, figuring out this, figuring out that, setting it up and saying, you know what, I think he's going to be bedded there on this wind. I think this is what he's going to do. He's going to come through here. He's going to come past that tree. And he set up in really the only tree you could possibly set up in a million trees in a forest, and watch that buck get out of the bed you think he's going to get out of and come to you and kill him right where you think you're going to kill him. That's the stuff I remember. It's the unique situations. It's the friend that drove halfway across the state to help you pull the deer out because he just wanted to be part of it. It's the ones that you remember that you don't even know it's the last time you're ever going to be with that person. He's going to die that summer, and that's happened to me many times. You never know when it's going to be the last time you're with somebody, whatever. But a lot of my best friends, that were real good friends back in the day, have kind of faded away. But what keeps us together is the hunting. And all my memories of those people over the years, since we were young, is hunting, and those are the things that I really dwell on.
Yeah. 100%, man. That's, and just taking time to soak in the moment, because the two deer that I killed last year, they were very different, like different experiences. Like the one, my buddies drove that were in Kansas with me and helped me get him out, and we had a great time. And I just remember them, the call on them, like, don't touch him, we want to come help. And then when we're walking up on him, my buddy Trey, like we could see him in the headlamp, like his rack glistening. I pulled him into like a cut bean field to get him out of the CRP. You can just see like one side of his rack sticking up. And my buddy Trey just yells, "Campbell, what'd you do?" Like, cause you could see him from pretty far away, he was like, good Lord. And then the one I killed in that swampy area that I kayaked in to kill and kayaked him out. Like, I killed him so early in the morning. It was like, I don't know what it was, like 7:30 maybe or something like that, or 20 after 7. And it was one of those things where I shot him so early in the day that I just told myself, cause I was excited and I wanted to get down and I wanted to get him. And I remember getting out of my tree and just telling myself, like, take your time, man. You got all day. Like, just enjoy this, And so I blood trailed him. I found him. I sat down with him for a little bit and just kind of like listened to the birds, got him gutted. The drag back to the kayak was terrible, but I enjoyed every minute of it because it was terrible. I got him to the boat. It's just like, I came home, hung him up in the garage, had me a Genesee beer, because that's what my uncle used to drink at hunting camp, and like skinned him out in the garage. And when I was done doing that, I sat on my back porch and had a cigar. I was like, it doesn't get any better than that. That's what I remember. Like, I remember the shot and stuff, but like what I remember is like the whole experience that I made an entire day honoring that deer, essentially. That's cool. Yeah. That's the way to do it. If I can do it like that every time, I would. Early kill, spend all day. If they only just turned out like that for you all the time. But well, cool, man. So I want to talk to you. Well, before I want to jump into your hunt, a couple of your hunts from last year. But before I do that, I wanted to ask you, with all the stuff out there that's available, and people more educated than ever, if there's a new hunter that's listening to this and maybe he's only been hunting like a year or two or whatever, that's diving into public land and really trying to get his bearings, he or she is really trying to get their bearings about them. What would your advice be for new hunters that their only option really is to go hunt public land, and they may not have like a super extensive set of skills at this point yet? Like, what would be your advice to them?
My biggest advice would be twofold. Number one would be stay away from places where everybody else is going. Look for the odd places that are places people skip over and don't think about. And number two would be to just keep moving. Every hunt be in a different spot. Just keep moving, because those deer pattern you. They will figure out where you're at. Most guys, especially new guys, it is uncomfortable to get out in the woods into new spots and new setups and stuff. And you got to get comfortable at being uncomfortable, because those bucks will smell where you've been and will stay away from that. You might still kill deer, but you'll never kill mature bucks in pressured areas year after year. You won't get in that game constantly if you're not hunting them fresh, just sneaking into areas and catching them off guard. They have to be caught by surprise.
Nice. When you said that was going to be my last, I wanted to get into your hunts, but then you made me think of another question. I'm curious what your thought is on how much ground scent you can get away with. So say you have access, right? As an example, and your access, depending on how that deer is moving, and he may have a couple of different routes that he's kind of using to kind of get to an area where you can intercept him, right? But you're going to have to cross one of his trails at some point, right? How much ground scent do you think you can get away with? Do you think that a mature deer that knows his area really well, if he comes across the trail and Dan's walked by it and he catches your ground scent and he's like, Dan was here 3 days ago, we're fine. Or, Dan was here this morning, this isn't good. Do you think there's anything to that, or do you think ground scent is ground scent?
I think ground scent is ground scent, but where it's located and the deer's life experiences and his attitude have a lot to do with it. So I think deer, just like people, are different. There's some people that will, in a bad neighborhood, drive up in their car, walk into a restaurant, go sit down with their back to the door, where I go in and I try to avoid that neighborhood. And if I do go in that neighborhood, I go to the far corner and I face the door so I can see somebody coming. And maybe I'm paranoid, but there's a difference between those two people, right? And deer are the same. Yeah. You get deer that will put up with people more than others. But you got to treat them all with kid gloves, because you don't know that attitude. But one thing I'll say is, deer will put up with your scent in certain spots, like where it belongs. Like if you walk a trail, like a hiking trail, you've probably seen it just like everybody else. You walk in an access into a public land and deer just walk across the access in front of you. You're like, holy crap, one just walked across. And even though people walk up and down that trail every day, he doesn't even smell it or nothing, just walks right across. Or you walk the edge of a bean field and deer comes in, sniffs where you were, sniffs it for a couple seconds, puts his head up, looks around, then goes back to feeding. Next day comes through again. Some of them will come through, smell that, and go about their business and not come back the next day, even though they've been coming through there. But where you really start getting a paranoia out of most mature bucks on public is around their bedding. So what I'm doing is very invasive, but it's also giving me a lot of action on big bucks. But you get that one crack. You got to get it right the first time. And if you're not aggressive about it, if you stay too far back,
right?
Like a lot of guys are like, this is my one buck, I don't want to blow this. So they sit back 200 yards and the buck goes through, and then they make a move and they're like, well, the buck disappeared. Well, a lot of times they move around during the night and they smell where you were, and they figure out somebody was in their area and they just move to one of their other bedding areas. So you got to get aggressive and take that right off the bat hunt, and just you got to realize that their sense of smell is so incredible. You're not beating it. It's just a matter of whether or not they put up with it, basically. Um, we
Right.
we just went over
That's
it
a
on
great way to think about it.
on an
Okay.
article, a bunch of articles. Did you know that they have dogs now that can smell you and tell you if you have cancer or if you have the starting of cancer?
I
They have dogs that smell
yeah,
your
I
breath,
did
that
know
smell
that.
your sweat. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Dogs don't
Hmm.
smell as good as a deer. They can tell if you have liver cancer or brain cancer or, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we need to train deer like that since they smell so much better, right? It's like
Yeah.
maybe that could be the next move on the beast is we're gonna get some like some physician level deer going on,
Right.
The yeah, I have a couple. It's interesting, like the whole hiking trail kind of area, thing like that. There's a spot that I have where it was just a spot that I kind of found last year. Scouted through, found some good sign, hung a camera, and then I didn't hunt it at all last year. It was just more of just I didn't have time to really. Just more kind of hung a camera for observation. Some really good deer in there, and I was surprised because I'm literally probably only 40, 50 yards off a very busy kind of public access trail, and the deer just do not care. Like all times a day, they're in there, which is good for me because I'll use that access. You know what I mean? Because they're expecting people there, and so I'll just be another one of the people that they've learned to tolerate.
Right.
But so now I want to move to your hunts from last year because one of the things that I always appreciate about you is, man, you put it all out there for everybody to see, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? Like everything, right? And I think that's why people, trust you, number one. And I think that's why you're able to help people become better hunters because they see, you're not shy about mistakes that you make and stuff like that, right? Because it's all part of the process. And so last year for you, like I watched the videos and stuff. It was like the ultimate juxtaposition season, right? Of like, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was
Yeah.
kind of like whenever I was watching the videos, right? Because, you ended up being successful overall, right? But it didn't come with its trials in Wisconsin and in Iowa, right? And so I guess let's start with like Wisconsin because you killed a hammer in Wisconsin, but it didn't come easy. So how did all that play out? Like it's a killer buck, right? But you've known of that buck for like a little while, or was a deer you just kind of found like in the season?
No, actually, you're better off starting on Iowa because Iowa is what made that deer get killed in Wisconsin.
Okay, let's start in Iowa then. Yeah, let's start in Iowa.
So, in Iowa, I went in and I was looking at some properties and stuff, and um, talking to my friend Scott Buckley, who lives down there, and he had suggested a certain property. And I went out there and I went into this kind of far back, overlooked kind of area, and I just found this tore up area. And I got in there, and you could just tell something really big had been moving through there. And I went like I was saying, that week before rut, and there wasn't very much pressure. And I had a hammer come in. It was at gray light. It was right at shooting light. Well, I take that back. It wasn't. About a 140 came by. Okay. And it came up this little cut access trail that was on the public, but the neighbor was mowing it like he owned it. And it walked up this and walked onto this private land into this field. And I wasn't too sure I wanted to shoot a 140, but it might have been a little bigger. I wasn't in that gray light, you know what I mean? So I grunted a couple times. I got no answer. So I grunted again a little louder. And then I hear something coming from over there, and okay, here it comes. So I go to turn the camera on, and it was not a new camera, but it's a new to me camera. I bought it used, and it's a little more technical than I am. So I had accidentally hit something that called gain, and I turned off the light gathering ability, and I had a black screen, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I I'm playing with this, thinking this buck's coming up that I'm probably not going to shoot. And I was in a pretty small tree and kind of skylit, but I'm playing with this thing, and I can, in my peripheral, I can see it walking up. And finally, I got it, it's recording, but I can't see the screen. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I just turned the screen off because I can't see nothing in it. It should be, even if you turn the gain down, you'd think you'd have some sort of image in there, just be dark. I couldn't see nothing. I'd turned the gain completely off or something. And I look up, and the buck had stopped, and it's like, now paranoid and looking around like this, like, okay, I can see everything. There's no buck here that grunted. And you can see this thing's getting like wiry. And when I look down, this is not the buck that walked past. This is like a gigantic, like 180s, 190s buck that is just tines everywhere. And I'm like, holy crap. And this thing's standing at like 5 paces, and I'm only like 12 feet in the air in this little tiny tree, and it's right underneath me. And I'm like, holy crap. And then the bow is hanging on the other side of the tree, and probably wasn't even going to get my bow down because I didn't think I was going to shoot this thing. And it was just like, I don't know how to say it, but it was a cluster from the beginning. And it was kind of embarrassing to myself that I would let that stuff go on. You know what I mean? Like I should have been more in tune with what was going on around me. I still kick myself for it. But anywho, I was finally able to get the bow down and get it around the tree, and he starts walking, goes around the other side, and I had to get it back around this side because the way the tree was leaning and stuff, I had the tree stand backwards like a saddle. So I had to get this bow around in front of me and underneath my my tether and get it drawn over here. And he knew something was up. He was like stiff walking, and he's walking away. And the trail he was on had a little hole that went into like a dark little cave of green stuff. And he was at 10 yards, and I put it right behind his shoulder and shot. And he ran out of there and stopped at about 50 yards. And all I could see was his neck over the stuff looking around like this. And that's not a mortally shot deer. I mean, they just don't do that. And I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Right.
And then it just disappeared, and I didn't know if it laid down there or if it ran off into the neighboring crop fields or whatever. And I sat there for about an hour, then I snuck out of the tree and went to where I shot it, and never recovered the arrow. But when I got down there and I looked up at the tree, the first thing I saw was there was a grapevine hanging in that little opening that probably in the low light I couldn't visualize. It was kind of a shadow where he was standing, but I could see him clear enough to shoot. It's not like I wasn't. I think this vine just blended in with his fur, and you could see where I hit this vine about probably 4 or 5 feet from him and cut it and severed it right in half. And then I don't know what my arrow did. So I didn't recover that buck, and that kind of sent me over the edge because I've been having some bad hunts the year before and stuff, and been really having problems with my vision, and just been getting some bad hits. And I kind of like went on a pity party, if you want to say that. Where I normally don't do that. I usually keep my attitude pretty high, but it was a giant buck, and everything I did was wrong right from the beginning. Like I should have been paying attention to what was coming. I should have, as soon as the camera wasn't working, just put it to the side, instead of trying so hard to get it working that I let that deer walk right up to me. And then I get that bad hit. Even though it was that vine, I just was blaming myself because the year before I had hit 2 deer bad, and so I ended up just getting kind of pissed off. I was there alone, and I went home, and got home and sat around the house for a day, and then kind of crawled out of my hole and got my attitude back up a little bit. I thought, well, at least I'll go hunting around here. And I thought, yeah, there's that spot I've been looking at. Last year I had a good confrontation with it. During the spring, I scouted and found a better situation because I had seen a deer, and it was one of the ones I wounded was there. But I figured out where these big bucks were coming from, and I moved over about 75 yards and had found a tree in spring. So I go out there, and it's a 200 acre or so parcel, and there's like 4 or 5 trucks there, and there isn't even parking for that. It's just crowded. I had to park on the grass up a ways, and I'm like, holy crap, what are all these people doing here? Which is a lesson in its own. I'm starting to figure out that, on a side note, that wherever I see a lot of cars, that's not what you want to avoid anymore, because now with all the cell cameras, those are the spots that got the big bucks you want to go after. If you ain't got no cars, there's nobody getting pictures of any of them. It's a sad world, but anywho, so I run back to that area,
Right? Yeah.
and I don't go past anybody. I don't run into anybody, so I don't know where they're at. But I get back in there, and I slide around to that tree real quietly, and I'm greatly disappointed. It was a solid buckthorn, but where the tree was a little opening. And when I had scouted in spring, there was heavy trails there, and what I found was it didn't look like the trails were all that used, and the leaves had dropped. This is a box elder tree, and it was pretty wide open, and it was on a severe angle. I had to put the stand on like this, so I was kind of standing in the open. I don't like being away from the tree. I like to be hugged up against it. And without the leaf cover, I really felt naked up there. But I figured, well, the deer are probably going to go in front of me. And because I was still a little bit on that pity party, I was thinking about just calling it or going someplace else quick. And I thought, no. My scouting and the sign showed me that deer lives right here. That there's something. I hadn't seen the deer, but something big was living right there. Don't just bet. At least give it a shot.
Right.
So I set up, slid into the tree, and I wasn't in the tree for more than 20 minutes, and I hear this really, really loud grunt. Too loud to be real. Got to be a person. And it comes from over by the bedding area kind of thing, and I'm like, there's got to be somebody over there. That can't be a deer. I think, well, get my grunt call out, and I grunt back. And I no more than put that in my vest. And that guy comes crashing through the brush, and there's this big buck walking straight to me. And I'm like, holy crap. And I'm thinking it's gonna walk in front of me, and instead it walks up to about 10 yards, turns on a dime, and starts walking adjacent to me where I'm skylit. I'm standing on this platform, and behind me is just open blue sky, and I'm like, oh, he's going to bust me. No deer of this age class is not going to see me in this tree. And he comes walking, never looks. Even after I grunted, usually they come in and they're like looking around. And he came in from the grunts, obviously, but just seemed to like be so rutted up, he just kind of forgot about it and just started going back about his business. And he comes by at about 10 yards, and I pull back the bow thinking he's going to see the movement. He doesn't. And then I tried to stop him. He doesn't stop, but he's walking so fast he's about to get out of my shooting lane. And I thought, 10 yards, I can't miss, and I shot. And he jumped and ran off. And then I was like listening for a crash. I never heard a crash. And I'm like, what happened? Did he stop over there? Did he run off or something? And all of a sudden I heard like this thud, and I didn't know if it was him running off or crashing or whatever. I heard a bunch of like glass and stuff and metal moving around and stuff, and then it sounded like this deer crashed off, and I wasn't too sure about exactly what happened. And because of what's been happening to me, I had a lot of doubt. Just thinking like I pushed that shot while it was walking and blah blah blah, and the shot looked a little low, maybe I hit too low. So I get out of the tree and I creep up to where the arrow should be, and there's no arrow. I'm like looking around, no arrow. You can see where because it's that lowland stuff where buckthorn grows. It's just black dirt, so you can kind of see where the hooves dug in when he had the impact and where he ran. And the arrow should have sailed right through him. Should be sitting right there. And I'm like, why can't I see this arrow? It's got white fletching. It should blend right in, and I mean it should stand out, And I'm like looking for it, and then all of a sudden I look real close and I see, well, there it is, but it was soaked in red blood, and it matched the leaves that were red, I'm like, holy crap! And I pick it up, and it's lung blood. And it's just heavy all over my hand when I pick the arrow up, and when I look up, I can see the buck laying there, it was, under the cover of that buckthorn, and it didn't get 30 yards. And the closer I got to it, the bigger it got. It just had tines all over the place, and I'd never seen it,
Sure.
which is usually those bucks I'm hunting a buck that I've seen that I know. This was totally the opposite. It was just, I went into a good spot thinking there's the signs telling me there's a good buck here. It's just kind of cool to get that surprise.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I almost feel like I'd rather be surprised sometimes. That's just kind of like a cool way, like where it's just, like if you think about it, like that's as natural as you can get. You know what I mean? Like, no trail camera picture of him. You know what I mean? It's just you showed up, the sign was right, you hunted it, and there he is.
Yeah, a bunch of people sent me trail cam pictures of that buck. So all those guys in that parking lot, sure enough, that's why that was so crowded. They were getting pictures of him.
That's awesome. That's funny. They get all the trail camera pictures of him. Like they show up to the parking lot, and there he is in the back of your truck. It's like, hey, are you guys looking for this guy?
Most people are pretty cool about it. You get congrats. Here, I'll share my pictures with you so you have them, stuff like that. But there's always the guys that aren't so gracious too. The guy in the neighboring property accused me of poaching, called the warden, said I was on his property. I said something in the video like, and that was the great thing, is that I filmed it so I could prove exactly where it was.
Right.
The thing died on one of those old farm dumps when it was a farm. And I filmed all of that when we recovered it and stuff. So, but anywho, that guy said the buck lives on my property. It never goes on the public. I've got trail cameras on all the exits of the public, and it never goes over there. And what I said when I was doing it is like, when I was doing the setup, I'm like, the buck bedding's over here for my scouting. The trails go through here, crosses over to there, and over there's food plots. There's like standing corn over here, and there's food plots back here. And you can see all that in the aerial, and you can see the corn right from where I'm standing. And the guy's like, there's no way he knows I have that stuff unless he's on my property. It's like some people are just jackasses, just jealous because I shot it, I guess. But,
yeah, exactly. It's he maybe would have killed it if he would have ventured off his property, maybe.
Yeah, maybe, or he could have shot it on his own. Just the luck has it, I shot it.
Yeah. And that's got to feel good to get the monkey off your back, because I've been there before where it's like I've had some, my first trip to Iowa was like that, where it was like I just felt like I could not do anything right. I mean, I ended up killing a deer on the last day of the hunt of that trip. But man, I screwed up a bunch of stuff, where it was just, it was one of those things where I was like, I don't know that I'll ever kill another deer with my bow. It got that bad, you know what I mean? Where you're just like, it may never happen again, So you kill that deer, he's a hammer. I was stoked to see it. Like, I was pumped, dude. That thing's a beast. No pun intended on that one. But then you made your way.
Because of those problems I had with the camera in Iowa, I hadn't figured them out yet. I hadn't figured out that gain thing. I had to actually call somebody, go over the camera to figure it out. But because of that, I took my potato and filmed the big buck on a potato. Otherwise, it's crystal clear at 10 yards. But it's a little blurry.
Right. Well, I mean, the story was still good nonetheless. And regardless, that was a hell of a deer, and I was stoked for you. And so then you turned your so you got redemption in Wisconsin, right? Like because you had a rough go like the year before, and then now you're headed back to Iowa, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, I turned on a dime. All of a sudden, I had a great attitude, and I was heading back down.
Yeah, right. It's nothing like a little killing a big deer to change the attitude, right?
Right, exactly.
Nice. Yeah. So you're headed back there. How did that? So, what happened there when you got back to Iowa?
So I went back down there, and I went to a little different area than where I shot that one buck, and tried to get away from the pressure, because now it was into November. And all the non-residents were showing up, and the parking lots were starting to fill up with people, and it was getting a little harder to find good spots. So I found a really remote area with a back access, and went back in there, and I was scouting a ridge, and from that ridge, I could see a lot of trails coming up from the bottoms and stuff. And looking out into, there's like this old lake that had dried up like there was a drought going on or something, and there was an island of trees
Hmm.
out there. I was looking on my phone, and I could see there was a river bottom in there. It just looked like a perfect spot for a buck to hide where nobody would look because there wasn't many trees out there or anything. So I was looking at that, and I was looking at these trails going on. There's some really big rubs coming in and out of that bottom land, and knowing everybody down there was hunting the hills, hunting the leeward hills and the points and stuff. And I'm looking at it thinking I'm in the right area, and if that don't tell you you're in the right area, my phone dings, and I look at my phone, and it's a picture of me walking, and it's Aaron Warbred, and hey, see, you're hunting in my area. All right, I'm in the right area.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Matter of fact, he sent me some
Nice.
pictures of some bucks, and one of them happened to be the buck I ended up getting. But
Right.
anywho, I went off across that lake bed. I got onto this island, and you could see a ton of sign the whole way coming from there and going to there. And you could look at around the point. You could see where the bedding would be and stuff. So I creeped in there in a way that I wouldn't mess up the front of that island, and creeped to the front of that island. And then there was just some heavy, massive trails kind of pinched together there. The trouble was there wasn't much for trees because it's not an area that gets logged or something. So, there's these giant trees that are so big around you can't get a strap around them or anything. I finally got something like a broken dead tree that I could get into. It's real funky, but I got into that and got set up and started having a lot of deer come by, and then a good buck shows up and he comes past and I had a shot, but I didn't take it because he was moving and he was at about 25 and I just didn't feel comfortable. I thought I was going to wound another one and I was excessively trying not to do that again, So I let a
Yeah.
halfway decent shot go. And then he came through some thick brush right in front of me at 15 yards where I had no shot, through the crap. And he gets beyond me. And a doe had gone through that way. And it seemed like he was following this doe. He was a ways behind her, but it seemed like he was, following her path. So he goes by and there's some trees blocking my view that direction. But other than those trees, it's really open in the direction he's going, and I could see the other side, and I could see this way. I just can't see through these trees, and that buck never comes out the other side. Neither does the doe. And it was really, really windy, so you couldn't hear nothing either. So I'm just, what are the odds that they turned and walked directly in line with these trees? I would think they would go that way. All the trails were going that way. And I'm thinking that. Then all of a sudden that doe comes popping back out, and she's coming my way on my side of that brush. And then sure enough, this buck comes out. And he's a pretty good buck, probably 150, And he's coming. She stayed in the cover, but he couldn't get his rack through the crap. So he comes around the side, and he is really close, like 10 yards, but quartering to me. And my problem with my vision has been that I can focus on the deer or I can focus on my pin. I can't see both. So what I've been doing is pulling back the bow when you got one walking in, and I'm aiming at it, and I put the pin on the chest, and I'm just waiting for the shot, So I get this bow pulled back. A lot of times I'll pull back when they're coming in or whatever, or when I'm going to shoot. But in this case, he's coming pretty close, so I wanted to get that bow back before he's in that range where he's going to detect it, So I get it back, and I'm just waiting, and he's coming in. And I'm focused on him. I got the pin on the kill spot, and I'm just waiting. He's kind of quartering to me, and I'm waiting for him to quarter. He's slightly quartering to me, not hard. I'm just waiting for him to turn towards that doe, which would be quartering away. And I got the pin. I'm following hard. And when he turns, quartering away to go down to that doe, I drop the string and I watch the arrow disappear right where I was aiming. And this deer jumps up and runs across the field, or not field, the brush that was the overgrown lake bottom, and runs out and disappears into that high grass. And I could see it at 200 yards slow down and walk into a thick area. And I called up Scott, told him I shot one and stuff, and he's like, "Did you get it?" I'm like, "I'm shot like right behind the shoulder. The thing's smoked." So he comes out. I met him at the truck, hike all the way back out there, which is over a mile. And we get back into the stuff. We get to where I shot this thing. And we had some blood, but it wasn't real good. And we followed that thing for like 400 or 500 yards. And in the end, it was chasing does. It was like, what the hell happened? I'm like, I know I smoked it. I saw the arrow go right where I thought. So we went back and we stopped at some outfitter's camp that Scott knew. And he had some big screen, and we put the video on the big screen and just wanted to see what happened. And that buck, when I saw it quarter away, it actually turned towards me. But my eyes saw it turn away. And that's part of that vision problem where I'm focused on that pin. And so then what I started to do was to try and focus on the deer, but look at the pin. This was my fix. My temporary fix was to focus on the deer and then look at the pin right when I'm going to shoot, and hoping that would fix the problem. So then I moved out of there because I just blew that area up. It was a small area. So I moved back into these ridges. I found this thermal hub way back, and I crept into that, and there was a ton of sign coming off all these points down into this bottom. And I set up in there and started seeing just bucks galore, like crazy, deer coming down in through there from the different points and stuff back and forth. And I had one come through that was just enormous, tines all over the place, probably 180s. And it came through, and it was the one day I forgot my grunt call. I left it sitting on my truck seat. I didn't know where it was when I got back to the truck. It was sitting on the front seat. Otherwise, I always had it with me. And I didn't notice it come in because it came in kind of from a different direction. But I turned around and I saw a tree like shaking, and I started looking, and at the bottom of it, you could see it was being rubbed by a buck, and all I could see was his ass end. And it was like at about 25 or 30 yards. So I'm like looking at this thing, and it's gonna come either right in or broadside to me, and it turns and goes broadside. And it never really gave me a shot. It stayed in a little bit of cover, but it got within range. It just wasn't a good, ethical, clean shot, especially the way I was shooting. And it got through and went up this ridge where everything had been going to bed. And I was fairly confident it went up there and laid down. If it went that way, I'd know it. If it went that way, I'd know it. It never came out of there. And other deer had come up there and bedded too. And what I did was that was like mid-morning, 8, 9 o'clock or something. At like 11:30 or something, I jumped down, and I wanted to move my stand anyways. I wanted to move over closer to where that buck went into that stuff so I could cover that trail if he took the same trail back out. And I ran back to the truck, got the grunt call, grabbed something to eat, and came back out there pretty confident that buck would come back off that hill. And I got into the tree, and it got to be about 1 or 2 o'clock, and all of a sudden I see deer start running out of there in different directions. And I don't know what's going on, and all of a sudden some dude comes creeping through there stalking with a bow. So he stalked right through the bedding area and chased everything out of there. Yeah. So then that kind of ruined that spot. And it was kind of, it got even worse because he stalks underneath me, gets right underneath me, and I don't say nothing. I'm just sitting up there kind of looking at him, and all of a sudden he looks up and sees me, like, oh, hey, you Dan Infalt. And then he wants to have this conversation. It's like,
Right.
It's like, we don't need a conversation in the middle of the woods. But
right.
So I was getting a little frustrated. I mean, here we go again. You wound one. Now you're having some problems and stuff. And I'm okay with the ones that you don't get a shot at, but the wounded ones bother me a lot.
Yeah,
so then I'm like, okay.
That.
So there's a point up here that most of the deer seem to be coming from, going to kind of thing. I'm going to go up around the backside of that point. There's a ravine draw that comes up and another one from the other side. It kind of has a pinching point up there. anything coming through there, and I've seen some deer on this end, different spots coming through there, has to go through there. So I go up this ravine, and I take the ravine up so I'm not getting scent all over the place, which made it a lot harder to get up there, but it kept everything kind of clean and kept my wind out of there. So I get up there, and I get to the top, and there wasn't a whole lot of sign. There was one scrape, one rub that was decent, and a couple small ones. And that was not much sign for that area. You know, like that thermal hub was tore up, you know, that island was tore up, you know. So I'm like, still, if there's good bucks coming through here, they have to be going through this funnel based on the map. They have to, you know, and it's got good bedding cover. It had some, you know, a cedar thicket up there and some other crap. And I'm like, okay. So I set up there, and a doe comes popping out from the thicket above. It's coming in. She's looking back, and all of a sudden you hear this just crazy grunting. I don't know if you watched that video, but some of the grunts were like 3 minutes long. It was like,
yeah, it was crazy. Like, I would hear it. I was listening to it, and I was like, I thought it was something else. Like after a while, I was like, that can't be that deer. And then it was like still going. I was like, holy smokes, man! I was like, that's a deer. You know, because when I first heard it, I was like, oh, that buck's grunting. I was like, that buck's grunting. What's that?
I said, there's a lot of people that made comments like, that was you, and it wasn't me. That was the deer that did that.
Yeah, no, it's like I figured it out. Like after when it first started happening, I was like, I thought I had like something else on my computer that was making a noise. Is what I kind of thought. I was like, what do I have on? You know what I mean? I was like, maybe there's another. Maybe I have another video playing behind it or something. And I was like, nope, that's that deer.
It's the most bizarre I've ever heard. I've never heard a deer do that before. That grunting was kind of wild. On and on. Some of the grunts were 3 minutes long, and he was following that doe around, and he gets in, and he, gets close, and he starts to turn and come my way. Well, he's kind of corralling that doe against the drop off of the ravine, and he's kind of coming. And she's coming behind me, and he turns to come around the front of me, and I get the bow pulled back, and then he turns to go back over there, but he gives me a shot at 20 yards, and I had that bow pulled back for quite a while, and I don't know what happened. I clean missed the deer, and I started having this panic, like, what the hell's wrong? What did I do?
Right.
Again, here we go again. And I contemplated not even taking a second shot. But then I'm like, no, it had to be some sort of fluke. I had to have hit something, or because I didn't even hit it. It's not like I was even in the ballpark. And I had no idea why or where my arrow went. So I just grabbed another arrow, put it on, and the thing turned like a pretty heavy quartering away, and hesitated. And I put it on the last rib and shot. And that thing bucked like crazy and tore off and ran over the hill, and you could see I hit it hard, and I thought I heard it crash. I was pretty sure I heard it crash over the hill. So it's a long walk back there. It was already at dark, and so I walk out of there and get back to the truck, get back to the house, and Scott was back at work. So I was staying at Scott's house. And Scott was back at work, and he lived 2 hours from there. So I called him, and he said, well, don't go after it. We'll go after it in the morning. Let's just go out there together, and kind of same as your friend. He wanted to be there, and him and his son. So, all right.
Right.
So in the morning we went out there, and really we picked up a little blood, and then we lost the blood. We couldn't find the blood, and go over the ridge where I thought it went, and you can see everything. It's wide open. And I'm like, there's no deer. You can see for hundreds of yards. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? And I'm really starting to deflate. Right. And Scott kind of wandered off on his own, and he yelled for me. And I go over by him, and he goes, your deer's down here. Your deer's down here. And I looked. I was in the wrong ravine and ran into a different one. They're laid dead. So ups and downs the whole season. So
yeah, man. That's that you ran the full emotional spectrum last year then.
Yeah.
It's it is crazy though, man. When you start, you get a couple bad experiences, and it can get away from you quick, because I've been there. Anyone's done this long enough, it happens to them. You know what I mean? Where it's like you get to a point to where you're like, man, I don't know if I can even shoot this thing, like shoot a bow anymore. You know what I mean? Like you start to really question, But and some people might hate to hear this, but it's like my buddies and I kind of have a saying, like it's like a basketball saying. It's like what Kobe Bryant would say. He's like, shooter gonna shoot. A shooter's gonna shoot. Like the only way you get back to making baskets is just shoot the basketball more. You know what I mean? And then you get a rhythm or whatever. And so. Right. It's not probably a popular thing to say, but yeah, exactly.
If it was all ethics and morals, I'd probably just pick up a crossbow. It'd probably solve those issues,
right?
But I just don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that I'm against crossbows. It's just not my thing. I mean, I love the chess match with the bow. And I don't want to lose that, so I'm struggling really hard to fix my problems with the shooting. I think I got it fixed now. I ended up putting a lens in my peep, and I actually had to use like the strongest lens they have. And now I can see my pin and the target at the same time. So nice. How that's affected with dew and stuff like that, we'll see. I've been shooting in low light in the yard, and it's working great. I'm shooting really well, and I can see both the target and the pin, so I'm thinking it's going to work.
Well, all I got to say now is if Dan Infalt can see his target and his pin, run, deer, run. Yeah. I was actually going to ask if you were going to put a lens in, because I know like some people have done that, but I would imagine, because I hunt without my glasses. I can't shoot my compound with glasses. I can shoot my longbow with my glasses on, but there's just something about like me trying to look through a peep and like the circular nature of my glasses and trying to I get disoriented really quick whenever I try to shoot with my glasses on. So I don't even wear them when I hunt. My vision's good enough still to where it's like, I can drive without my glasses. I can read without them. It's just my eyes get tired if I'm like looking at a phone or whatever. But there was a time where I'd contemplated like putting in a lens in my peep as well, just to kind of like solve all that. And I hesitated to for the same reason you were mentioning. It was just like fog and stuff like that. But I got to imagine there's like fixes for that. Like as far as, something you can put on it or something like that, that's a defogger or something like that, I would imagine.
Tiny windshield wiper.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Little tiny windshield wipers. Awesome, man. Well, hey, buddy, I've kept you about an hour and 40 minutes, man. I want to be sensitive to your time. I want to make sure you are in good graces with the wife so you have plenty of opportunity to hunt this fall. I don't want to be the reason why you got to stay home an extra day. But before you get out of here, though, let folks know, if they don't already know, where they can find out all the latest and greatest stuff you have going on, from the Hunting Beast content to like all the gear and things like that.
Yeah, so the biggest thing I got on that your viewers would like is my YouTube channel. So if you haven't watched this stuff, the hunts we were talking about are on there. You have to dig a little. I've done a lot of scouting videos and stuff too since those hunts. But there's a lot of cool hunts on there, including the ones we just talked about. And I also have Hunting Beast gear, where we build mobile equipment and sell it to the public, sticks and stands and such. And I have a website forum that's pretty popular. It's like a Facebook that's actually, you can actually say what you want as long as you don't offend people. That's pretty cool that people would like.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, people, if they haven't checked that out, that was the first place that I had learned, it's like a master's class on whitetail hunting, from not just the stuff you put in there, but also just like the people who are on there are very well rounded hunters as well. And so you get a lot of good direction there. So
yeah, just search Hunting
Awesome,
Beast.
Man. Yeah. Sweet. I appreciate you coming on, buddy. I'm going to text Mario, our buddy, Mr. Mario Trificante, here soon, because I know we have wrestling coming up on the Olympics, and he and I are both big grappling fans. And we have to have a little wager or something, and I need to get him back on so we can talk a little wrestling. He's my grappling buddy. He's the guy I have on to talk some grappling.
There you go. Mario's cool.
Awesome, buddy. Well, you be well. Good luck this season, and I'm sure we'll be in touch, man.
All right. See ya.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Osseo Gear, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.